Is John Morton a bad offensive coordinator? Is he a bad coach for the Detroit Lions? That is the question that has been circulating around the Detroit Lions fan base over the past 2 to 3 weeks and over the past 2 to 3 games. And I think if you were to go downtown and you were to ask people off the street, is John Morton bad? I think 80 to 90% of them would say yes, based on the comments I'm getting on videos, based on Twitter, based on other social medias, based on even the fans in, live games booing and, not liking what the Detroit Lions are doing on the field. And I can't blame fans, right? It does feel this season, especially as opposed to the Ben Johnson era, that there are big plays left on the field, that there are third downs that the Lions could have converted, but don't, that the offensive line and the run game isn't nearly as explosive. The pass game doesn't seem nearly as efficient. And it certainly seems as though the Lions have taken a step back offensively than what they were at maybe a season ago. But is that John Morton's fault? Is it solely John Morton's fault? Are there other factors behind the scenes that are leading to some, sustaining drive issues, that are leading to the Lions not putting points on the board as they should, not converting third downs as they should, not being as efficient as they could be? Or is it simply just the fact that John Morton is a bad offensive coordinator? Well, let's take a look at some of the numbers, because the numbers would tell you the Lions aren't a bad offense at all. They rank 15th in total yardage across the league. They rank 14th as a passing attack and 14th as a rushing attack. They are second in the NFL in points scored and sixth in the NFL in red zone efficiency. Their Achilles heel, however, has been their third down offense, where they rank 25th in the NFL in converting on third downs. If they are in a third down situation, especially if they are in a third and long situation, which they have found themselves in more times than not this year, it is pretty likely that they are not going to convert that third down, right? They are not staying on the field, and the defense is making plays to get them off the field. That is a big issue, and that is the biggest concern as to what the Detroit Lions have going on in their offense at the moment. And it's not so much a third down issue as it is a first and a second down issue. The Detroit Lions aren't getting easy yards like they used to. They aren't setting themselves up in good third down situations like they did in years prior. Under Ben Johnson, you'd see a lot of 3rd and 2s, 3rd and 1s, 3rd and 4s, situations where the Detroit Lions could easily convert. You could give it to Jahmyr Gibbs twice. You could give it to David Montgomery twice. You could give it in Jared Goff's hands and put it in, Amon-Ra St. Brown in a spot to succeed. But now we're seeing a lot more 3rd and 8s, 3rd and 9s, 3rd and 14s, 3rd and 15s. The Lions are not moving ahead of the chains on every single play like they have in years prior, which is putting them in poor third down situations, which means they can't sustain drives, they can't move down the football field, and it just feels like the offense is really lacking in that very critical major area. Now, as far as points scored go, the Lions have been pretty good in that category. They put up 13 points in week 1 in a really devastating loss to open their season. But they've bounced back. They put 52 up on Chicago, 38 on Baltimore, 34 on Cleveland, and 37 on Cincinnati. They then go to Kansas City, a top 5 scoring defense in the NFL, and certainly had their challenges, but put up 17 and were in a position to win that game should a couple things go differently. They come back out, they go 24 points against Tampa Bay and 24 points against a Brian Flores-led Minnesota Vikings team. That has led a lot of people to say, yeah, well, John Morton and the offense can beat up on bad teams, right? They can beat up on the Baltimore Ravens. They can beat up on the Chicago Bears. They can beat up on Cincinnati and Cleveland. But when they play good playoff teams, they're not putting themselves in a position to win. And that is, I think, fair, but I also think is a little bit disingenuous to the defenses the Lions have faced this year, because they haven't faced too many truly awful defenses at this point in the season. The Packers are fantastic. They rank 8th as a scoring defense and 6th on third down conversion percentage. The Bears, 29th in scoring defense, but they are 5th in the NFL in third down percentage, meaning they get off the field more than almost anybody in football on third down. The Ravens are 25th and 20th respectively in those positions. The Browns are 17th against the score and 11th in third down conversion percentage. So they are not a bad defense either, and the Lions put 34 on them. The Bengals are 32nd against scoring, 31st in third down. That one pretty given. The Bengals aren't very good, admittedly. The Chiefs are 4th in scoring defense and 19th in third down defense. The Bucks are 13th in scoring defense and 16th in third down defense, while the Vikings are 20th in scoring and 17th on third down. However, those numbers are a little bit skewed due to the Carson Wentz era of Minnesota Vikings football, where there were a couple of games there where they were turning the football over a lot. There were a couple defensive touchdowns to go against Minnesota, so that number is slightly skewed, but even so, they are not a bad defense. We saw last week they are far from a bad defensive unit, especially when healthy and the offense offense can do their jobs. So taking a look at those matchups, I would say the Detroit Lions have faced two elite defenses in Green Bay and Kansas City, which of course are their two worst offensive performances, as you could imagine. They've played three good defenses. I would even argue four good defenses in certainly the Browns are a good defense. The Browns are a good defense. The Buccaneers are a good defense. Minnesota is a good defense. And you could even argue Chicago is a okay defense. I know that their scoring isn't fantastic, but their third down efficiency, I think, could bring them a little bit more towards the middle of the pack as opposed to the back. But even if you want to argue they've played three really poor defenses, yeah, they've played Chicago, they played Baltimore, and they played Cincinnati. They beat up on those teams and they won those games extremely easily, meaning the Lions can absolutely beat bottom dwellers without a problem. They, most of the time, I would say, beat good football teams like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, teams like not so much the Cleveland Browns, although their defense is quite good, and they beat the Chicago Bears, who are 5-3 pretty handedly. So the Lions can beat up on bad teams. They can play pretty good competitive football and win, I would say, 80% of their games against good teams. The question is, can they beat elite teams? Can they beat true playoff contenders? And can they beat teams that are vying for a Super Bowl this season? That is the question, and I think that question remains to be seen. They've lost their big game against Green Bay, but they're going to have a chance to make up for it. They lost their game against Kansas City, but they're going to have a chance to potentially rectify that victory as well. As the season goes on, they're going to get another chance at Minnesota. They're going to get another chance at Green Bay. They're going to get a chance at Los Angeles. They're going to get an opportunity to play some really quality opponents as the season goes on. And not this week, but of course, a week from now, the Lions are going to be gearing up to play the Philadelphia Eagles, the reigning Super Bowl champions. So they're going to have a chance. They're going to have an opportunity to prove that they belong with the big dogs again, but certainly they are not a bad team. And no, John Morton, of course, is not a bad offensive coordinator. Now, what is the issue here? Why are the Detroit Lions so bad on first and second down? Why are they so bad on the third down? Why are they not efficient with the way that they play the game? Well, there are a lot of changes from 2024. Of course, Frank Ragnow retiring hurts the offense tremendously, as is Kevin Zeitler leaving in free agency. The Lions are starting a rookie at right guard, and as good as that rookie may be, it comes with communication errors. It comes with rookie growing pains. It comes with some issues on the offensive line, especially when it comes to playing in a unit of five, as opposed to just being a good individual player. Glasgow at center doesn't help the Lions' offensive line. It, in fact, makes them significantly worse. Christian Mahogany is the starting at left guard, and while he has been pretty solid, he is not nearly as good as a player like Kevin Zeitler was a season ago for Detroit. Taylor Decker has missed time, and against Minnesota, that was the biggest issue. The Lions had 9 different offensive fronts go out there as Penei Sewell, Taylor Decker, Tate Ratledge, and Christian Mahogany all missed snaps on Sunday's game. That, against a Brian Flores defense that blitzes a ton, is not a recipe for success. The good news is these things are fixable. The penalties are fixable on offense. The efficiency is fixable on offense. The Lions rank top 10 in the NFL in yards before contact in the running game, meaning their run blocking hasn't been as bad as most people believe it to be. Their pass protection hasn't been nearly as bad as I think a lot of people believe it to be, even though it wasn't great last weekend against the Minnesota Vikings. This offensive line can be good, and when it's healthy, it is a good offensive line unit, but David Shaw said it best in an interview, I think yesterday or the day before. He said the Lions are explosive, but they are not efficient. They struggle on first and second downs. They struggle in pass protection at times. And while they can certainly hit the big play to Jahmyr Gibbs, they can certainly hit the big play to Jameson Williams. They have a great players in St. Brown and Sam Laporta and David Montgomery to back those guys up. They are not efficient. They don't move the ball as efficiently as they should on early downs. That puts them in bad positions on later downs. But truly, at the end of the day, no, the Lions are not a bad offense. They have 4 games this season scoring 34 plus points. They've scored 24 plus points in 6 of their 8 games against every defense that isn't in the top 10. And if those defenses are in the top 10, it's because they don't give up a lot of points. Those defenses aren't good because the Lions played them. Those defenses are good, and the Lions offense didn't put up 30 points because those defenses were very, very good against everybody in the NFL. That's what makes a defense good and elite, is they don't give up a lot of points. You cannot go into a game against top defenses expecting to put up 35 to 40 points. That is going to be why you think John Morton is a bad offensive coordinator. But at the end of the day, he's dealing with offensive line injuries. He's dealing with offensive line inconsistencies. He's dealing with, a lot of good defenses this season. He's played some really strong caliber defenses on the other side. And while they're not as good as they were under Ben Johnson, while they're not as elite or productive or efficient as they were in years past, they are far from bad. I don't think you can look at any statistic, any metric, any number and say that the Detroit Lions are a bad offense. Yes, they have issues. Yes, they have deficiencies. Yes, there are areas where they absolutely need to improve, but in no world could you call this a bad offense. In no world could you look at what John Morton is doing and say he is a bad offensive coordinator. There are certainly things to clean up, but there is not a big glaring issue in the offensive coordinator position as a whole. Think back to a couple of years ago. Think back to the last couple of years. There were games where Ben Johnson got shut out entirely. There were games where Ben Johnson didn't put up very many points. There were games where people were calling for Ben Johnson's job. There was a game after they lost in the playoffs to Washington where people were out there genuinely arguing that Ben Johnson wasn't a good play caller, that he didn't have a good offensive calling game in that moment where they put up 31 points in the playoffs. There were games where people were upset with Ben Johnson. There were games where everybody was saying Ben Johnson's overhyped. He's not what he should be. He's not, a good head coaching candidate, that he's not going to succeed elsewhere without the elite weapons. Those conversations were had about Ben Johnson as well. And now that he's gone, everybody thinks Ben Johnson's fantastic. Everybody thinks Ben Johnson is elite. Everybody thinks Ben Johnson, oh, well, we wish we had him back. But when he was here, everybody said he was bad. When he was here, there were tons of discourse. There were tons of people saying, well, Ben Johnson's not as good as a lot of people think. Ben Johnson doesn't run the ball as much as he should. Ben Johnson gets too cute when things matter. Ben Johnson isn't good. There was a genuine discussion that Ben Johnson wasn't good as an offensive coordinator when he was here in Detroit. Those are the same people saying John Morton is bad. Those are the same people that are upset with where the Lions are right now. Again, they are not perfect. They are far from perfect, and they certainly have things to improve upon and work on, but this is not a bad football team. This is not a bad offense, and this is not a bad offensive coordinator. When you go from maybe the best offensive mind we've seen ever in Detroit to a just pretty good coach, it feels like a massive downgrade, but it really, truly isn't. The Lions are second in the NFL in points. The Lions are averaging 29.5 points per game. They are going to be just fine. They are going to beat Washington this week. They're going to be 6-3. They are going to continue to be a top 5 scoring offense in football, and they're going to have their chances to show their elite. They're going to have their chance against Philadelphia. They're going to have their chance against Los Angeles. They're going to have their chance against Pittsburgh. They're going to have another go at Green Bay, another go at Minnesota. We're going to see what this team is made of. But to answer the question at the top of the video, no. John Morton is not a bad offensive play caller. There are a lot of moving parts to an offense. There are a lot of missing pieces to the offense that John Morton is calling. And while there certainly are issues, like I've been saying, it is not a bad offense. So with that being said, I hope it kind of opens your eyes a little bit to what John Morton is going through, to what the offense is struggling with, and to show that, yeah, there are some concerns, but they're fixable concerns. There are things that can be improved upon, and I think things that will be improved upon as the season moves forward. But with all that being said, that is it for guys today. Of course, let me know your comments down in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your opinions on what you think the biggest issue with this team is. But with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, and as always, go Lions.